going on about how good it is, and he keeps looking at the rabbi while he's eating the bacon sandwich and the ham sandwich, and said, you know, I know you don't eat pork, but you just don't understand how good ham is and how really good bacon is. He said, I know you consider it a sin, but he said, when are you going to break down and try it one time? Would you ever consider trying it? He said, you can break some of your rules. It's not that big a deal. And the rabbi kind of leans back and looks at him and said, tell you what, I'll have a bacon sandwich. And the priest said, really? When? He said, at your wedding. So he kind of got him back there a little bit. But anyway, one of the things I thought I'd talk about, I went outside last night and I was trying to get some things done. And I was out there just we had some grass planted in a few bare spots. I was just kind of checking on that and seeing how it was doing before the rain came and all those sort of things. And it was just starting to get a little dusky outside. And it's something I always look forward to in the spring because it means that spring is really here. And it was the first time I've heard it this season. The tree frogs were singing. And if you don't live around the woods, and a lot of people get them confused for it's crickets and call them crickets, but it's not. It's the tree frogs. And that's about when they start croaking out. They're not very big. They're only about that big. And, they climb up in the trees and they just sing away. It's to me, it's beautiful music, but I always like it because I like summertime. And it just means that warm weather is here. The other thing that happened was when I went in the house, Gil said, guess what? So what's that? Said there was a hummingbird come flying around today. So I put the hummingbird feeder out there. And that's two things Gail does is she plants hummingbird flowers for the hummingbirds and the butterflies, and she puts out hummingbird feeders. And a lot of times when we're eating lunch in the summertime, we'll sit there and watch the feeders. I'm going to tell you, if you've not had a hummingbird feeder or you've not been around hummingbirds, everybody thinks that they're, the nice, sweet, beautiful little birds. Those things are meaner than snot. And aggressive and protective, and it's funny to try to see one of them trying to protect that hummingbird feeder from about 3 or 4 others. And their brain can't be but maybe that big, but it's funny to watch them because they figured it out. One of them will come down, buzz around the bird feeder or the hummingbird feeder until that aggressive one comes down, and then he chases them off and he goes way out there. And then you know what happens during that time? 2 others come down and they're hitting that feeder real quick and sucking up as much of the nectar as they can come. And then he comes back and there they go, and he's chasing them off. And then this first one comes back and he's feeding. So they're making out all right. They're about to wear him out. But, they do perch because he'll go up. If he's finally got them all run off, he'll go up and perch in a little sassafras tree right there by it. And it's just cool to watch them. The other thing we kind of look forward to is when the bats come out of hibernation, and it's just nice to watch them at night and see them fluttering around. And we're kind of surprised they still hang around as close to the house as they do. There's usually 2 of them because about 3 years ago, there's a guy here in Park County, believe it or not, and if you're ever interested in it, you can contact me. I'll give you his name and number and all that. But he sprays for mosquitoes. We've had him do that in our yard for about the last 3 years, and we don't have mosquitoes. We can sit outside after dark. And before that, there was a year, I don't know if it's the year before that or the one preceding that, we couldn't go outside. Like to pull up in the driveway, you kind of got all your stuff together, open the door, and charged into the house because you couldn't go outside for anything. But it works out really well now. And then, of course, there's nothing like the excitement of seeing the robins in the spring. But I got to tell you, last Tuesday, a week ago yesterday, I started thinking when it was. That's when we had the big snow. And of course, that's one thing I told them at work is only in Indiana do you mow your grass. Try to mow your grass before the snow comes. Monday I was out mowing grass till dark, and I actually went in, and Brian had asked me the next day, he said, "What'd you do?" I said, "Well, I was out last night trying to get the grass cut before it snowed." I said, that's probably something you only say in Indiana. But anyway, we had an ad council meeting here at church, and I was coming in for that, and I always turn there at the bank, and I come past the Joneses there, and Mary and Bob's, and the snow was coming down crazy on Tuesday, and they've got this beautiful flowering tree out on the corner. It's nice and purple and all that kind of stuff, but it's really thick this time of year. And underneath that tree, to get out of the snow, was about 5 or 6 robins kind of gathered together right up close to the trunk. It was about the only place around there wasn't any snow. Just thought that was kind of funny, a little bit out of their nature, but they knew what to do to get out of the snow. But we always like looking for the things for the turn of the seasons and all that. Last time we talked about the seasons and the moon and Earth Day and all those things and what God created and all that. And I also heard a thing about that said a little boy was talking after Sunday school, and he asked his mom. He said, "Mom, I don't understand what the pastor said today." And she said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, he said that when God created the earth, that there was him and the Spirit, and they were one." And she said, "Yes, so what don't you understand?" He said, "Well, I'd have thought he'd had to have been a whole lot older than that." But, God did create everything and didn't just create things to be static, but to keep things moving and to always make them more beautiful. It's one of those things, whether it's human nature or what. Gail feeds the birds, feeds the squirrels, and just about anything. She feeds me. That's a good thing. But, you kind of get to where you take for granted the birds that are around all the time. When the new ones come in, it just kind of sets things off and livens them up and all of that. And it just reminds us of everything that God did. And, the birds and the tree frogs and the bats and all of those things. And that, everything that God made, there's 2 things that we know about it. Number one is that he knew what he was doing and he intended to make it. And so number 2, it had a purpose. And, God didn't just make things at random. This earth didn't come along just because things happened to go and they developed in different ways and, that whole evolution thing and all of that. God created things to be specific. The bats, mammals that fly, that eat the insects, that keep the mosquitoes down. I read one time that each one of them eats, it's thousands, it's like 4,000 or 5,000 mosquitoes a night. And, it's just a natural thing. And the way the tree frogs operate and the way that they call out at night, trying to call in a mate and all of that, and just all the rest. And the hummingbirds that fly down to Central America for the winter, and the robins that go wherever it is that robins go. We had the pelicans again this year down in the lake that migrate from the Gulf Coast up to all the northern lakes and all those sort of things. It's just cool, that all those things are not by accident. All those were made by God with a purpose. And we read a little bit about that in the book of Genesis. So, last time we read, start with verse 14 on chapter 1, and that about God making the earth and the stars in the sky and the different lights and everything. And then it starts with verse 20, and that was the 4th day. It starts with verse 20. And it said, let the waters teem with living creatures, let birds fly above the earth, across the expanse of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living and moving thing which with the water teems, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in numbers and fill the water of the seas and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. Then let the land produce living creatures according to their kind, livestock, creatures that move along the ground. He probably could have left those out. Creatures that move along the ground, wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kind, livestock, creatures that move along the ground according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. And then he made man. So with all that, sometimes we forget about what we are able to enjoy. We forget about God's creatures. We forget about the glory of the Lord all around us and what we get to see. And I was trying to remember, and sometimes that gets harder than others. But if I'd ever told you before, I know I've told the story to some people, but of course, we live out on the other side of the lake, and we've got a few acres out there and a lot of woods and all that. But anyway, we do like to watch the birds, and Gil feeds them and all the other things like we talked about. But still, sometimes you may look, but it's kind of like the Bible says, you can look, but you don't see. Or, the old saying that we have, you can't see the forest for the trees. But anyway, my sister and my brother-in-law, Steve, they were in a singles group for people over 50. Now, it was a church group at Faith something church. There's so many faith churches out there. It's kind of, I'm not sure which one it was, but anyway, this church-based group of these people, these singles over 50, and it wasn't like a dating group or these were people over 50, comfortable with who they are and what they are, and they met together to do things, to go out to eat together, to go to movies, to have discussions. And so one of the things that they would do is twice a year they would come to our house, and one time they would come once in the summer and go out on a pontoon boat and tool around the lake. Some of them would swim and all those sort of things. And then there were other times, or they also would come during October, not during the festival, but sometime during October. They'd come a little bit later in the afternoon and hang around. We'd have some outside fall type stuff, and then usually a wiener roast and a hayride on our wagon. And so one time in the summer was one of the first times they came that there was one gal with them. She was one of the younger ones of the group. But I was getting ready to take a bunch of them out on the pontoon. And she said, no, I'm just going to stay here on the deck. And sometimes people do that because they really don't like to be on the water, or they're afraid of the water. Or like some of you watching, they think there's snakes in the water. And so anyway, I thought I was going to sneeze. So, excuse me, I guess I was. But anyway, sometimes they do that. I didn't think anything about it. So we came back. Well, I'll tell you a story about out on the lake here in a minute. But I came back, and she kind of motioned me over, and I was standing there next to her where she was sitting on the deck, and she was kind of facing the bird feeder. And she said, what kind of bird is that? It was a dove. I said, it's a dove, and what's that? And, there was a titmouse there. There was the nuthatches, that kind of hang upside down on the pole. She just about went crazy over those. And then the goldfinches, and then was telling her that, they're gray in the winter and yellow in the summer, and just absolutely fascinated, and spent almost the whole day just sitting there watching the birds. And just not just not just watching the birds, but marveling at the birds and at how beautiful they all were. And some of them, like we said, that we just take for granted. And and it was kind of interesting because just before that, when we were out on, no, that was later. It was in the fall when they came. That was in the summer. So it was later when they come back in the fall. We've got some out on the boat, and they hadn't started draining the water yet, and so we were kind of having the last go around, and a lot of the leaves were off the trees, and so I was telling everybody, I said, watch for the eagles. Here's a spot where some eagles generally are. Everybody kind of watch for the eagles up in the trees as we go along, or the ospreys, and so everybody's just kind of. And this one lady says, "What's that magnificent bird up there?" I'm looking around, I'm looking for an eagle. And I said, "What bird?" "That bird up there." And I said, "Do you see an eagle somewhere?" She said, "No, I don't know what it is. It's a huge bird right up there. It's so graceful. It's so beautiful. It just seems to own the sky." And I said, "Where?" And she said, "Right there." And I turned around and looked. I said, that's a buzzard. And it was a big old turkey buzzard just up there, kind of like they do. And she went on and on and on about the beauty of turkey buzzard. Now, my question for you is, when is the last time, or when has there ever been a time in which you looked at a turkey buzzard and said, "What a magnificent, graceful bird"? Well, in both of those instances, it kind of took me back a little bit and thought, because I thought, I've never looked at a buzzard in that way. I've seen buzzards all my life. My dad had a farm, and buzzards were always around. They've always been soaring and all those things, and I never thought about it. And I got to looking at the buzzard and watching the way that it soared over the lake and back and forth, and just kind of went with the breezes, and thought, it is pretty cool. Here's a bird. I mean, it's a scavenger. It eats some pretty nasty stuff, but God made it too. God made it to do what it does. And I talked about that not too awful long ago, that if it wasn't for them, there'd be a whole lot more messes around and all that. But the same thing with all of the other birds. My guess is that you didn't even pay attention to the last time you saw a bird going through your yard, or especially a dove, or maybe even a robin, other than the first sight of robins in the spring, a nuthatch, a goldfinch, or anything else. We forget what we have living here in the Rockville area. And it kind of came to fullness when, in the fall, when they were there and we had the wiener roast, and we had them on a hayride. And as we were kind of taking them out, there's a couple of subdivisions south of us. It's got a lot of streets with cul-de-sacs in them and a lot of woods, and it kind of makes a nice little hayride. And I'm coming back, and I'm going due east, headed out for the county road. And all of a sudden, everybody's hollering, "Stop, stop, stop." I thought somebody fell off the wagon. Shut the tractor down, went running back there, and then I'm trying to figure out what, because these cameras are going off like crazy. So then I'm sure somebody fell off the wagon, and they're all laughing about it because everybody's going on about how beautiful something was. And I thought, and finally I said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, look behind you." And I turned around and looked. It was just a full moon. And I said, "What?" And they said, "Look at that full moon." And I said, "Yeah, it's that time of month." And one guy said, "You don't understand what we're looking at." And I said, "What's that?" He said, they all lived in the Fishers, Noblesville area up there northeast of Indianapolis. And they said, this guy's probably 60 years old. He said, "I don't remember The last time I saw the moon, a full moon coming up over the trees. We see the moon coming up over the buildings, and then we hardly see it because there's so much light. Because it was one of those big old autumn moons. It just looked like it was as wide as it could be and as bright as it could be. You know, it was so bright out you could tell colors at night. And there was the beauty of God's earth that's before us all the time. But we got so used to it that we didn't see it. They saw it. And in all those instances, I always try to use those to remind myself to look at the creation, to look at what God made. And it's just like we read here a couple of minutes ago. You know, it said that God made them, and it was good. And I think it's still good. Whether it's the might of a little hummingbird and how smart they are in being able to figure out things. If it's the purpose of that, I'd say ugly old buzzard, they would think differently. You know, the wisdom in the robins about when to leave, when to come back, the bats, just all the things together, all the different kinds of birds. You know, there's not just one kind of bird. I'd hate to count how many birds are even around our house. Gail bought a book not too long after we got out there, and it was called The Birds of I don't remember if it was the Birds of Indiana or the Birds of the Northwest or whatever. It's supposed to be all the birds that are in our territory right here. And that sucker, it's that thick. And, you know, and so, but we forget about those things and we take them for granted. We should never take God's beauty for granted, no matter what. And we should enjoy where we live. We forget about what we have living where we live. You know, the fresh air, the trees, the birds, the music of the birds, the songs of the tree frogs, you know, and even the wonder of a bat that can find a little bitty old bug in the middle of the night when it can't even see. You know, that's pretty cool. And just all those things together. So what I'd like to, I don't know, challenge you with, charge you with, is look at things anew. Look at the things around you as if you haven't seen them before. Then you'll see God's beauty. Let's not take what the Lord gave to us. You know, when I read all that, I got right down to the point where I stopped was where God created Adam and Eve. Because God made all these other things first so that they would be here for us. So let's not take them for granted. Whether it be the moon that we talked about last week and all those people that just think we hit the jackpot when we know it wasn't a jackpot. God put it there. The animals that he created, the fish, the reptiles, the birds, the mammals, all the animals that crawl on the ground, and all those things together. And just look at it with the wonder of someone that hasn't seen it or someone that doesn't get to enjoy it and get a new appreciation for the wisdom, the power, the knowledge of God and the graciousness of which he gave those things and made those things to make this world work in the way that it does so that we can live here and know that he is God. And the Bible tells us, Paul says, I think it's in Romans, that the proof of God is all around us. And then in the song, and he says, all you have to do is look. When it says, some people say that they don't see evidence of God, he says, look around. The psalmist says, look at the sky, look at the animals, look at the mountains. They have no mouth, but they speak volumes of God's power, wisdom, and his grace. So over the next few days, of course, tomorrow may not be a really good day to look at it, but think about what you have, where you live, the beauty in God's creation around you, whether you're here in Rockville, if you're in Indianapolis, if you're out on the East Coast, or wherever you may happen to be. Look out your front door, look out the window, look out the back, and appreciate what God made for you to live in. So go, have a good week, be blessed in all you do. And I'll catch up with you later.